brain is so chaotically working, it forms memories in a very weird way.
Especially when it comes to something that's so significant, like the president getting shot or any sort of violent thing. Now, this is something that gets repeated ad nauseum about 9/11. It's something that people point to where they think that when the planes hit those buildings, that there was detonations that caused Tower 1 and Tower 2 to fall. There's no way they would have fallen like that. Like when people say, no, they heard things in the buildings, they heard explosions. People always say shit like that. And on top of that, if you're dealing with a building collapsing like that, you're going to hear a lot of crazy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, there are going to be explosions. Things are falling. You know, there were people falling off the buildings.
Which goes to Tower 7. That's another one that keeps coming up. See if you can find the video, Jamie. There's the video that shows what really happened in Tower 7. There's a guy who was a conspiracy guy. He was really deep into conspiracies. And then the more he started looking into Tower 7, the more he realized that everyone is just showing the very final video where Tower 7 collapses like a controlled demolition. And it looks exactly like a controlled demolition. However, if you find the full video, you see that the interior had collapsed moments before, like quite a bit before.
Edward Current, I think, is the guy who did that
video. I think
video.
that's exactly who it is. See if you can find that gentleman's video. But he shows how the top of it, you could see the top of Tower 7 give in, which is consistent with this idea that the diesel fuel that they had in the basement had created, wasn't it like diesel tanks?
Yeah, that was an early theory of the diesel fuel, that was actually fueling the fire, but they never found any evidence that actually the diesel fuel contributed to the fires. It was just regular office fires, which is what everybody finds so suspicious.
So the diesel never caught fire? Is that what they're saying?
They don't know. It might have been after the collapse. I think they recovered one of the tanks with some diesel still in it.
So, series of diesel, likely fed by a series of diesel generators located in the lower floors, which is where most of the fires were concentrated. So at least one of the diesel tanks didn't light up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The theory, like NIST theory, is that the diesel had nothing to do with it.
Okay. So NIST, which if you are a conspiracy theory person, they get really angry when you bring up NIST.
Because they're the government.
The government, man. So
I think this is an older video.
Yeah, this isn't the video, Jamie.
Yeah.
There's one by
Edward Current.
Yeah. And what it does is it shows the top of the building cave in first, quite a bit before the rest of the building. So this idea that it all cave in like a controlled demolition because they detonated all those things. So, is that Edward Current?
Yeah, I don't gotta find a good spot of the video to show it. So
okay.
Video, you know.
Yeah. So what happened? What they think was that the fire. That's a shitty design of a building, and the fire caused internal damage to all of the floors.
Well, first of all, you see there the World Trade Center 1 fell basically against the side of 7.
Yeah, it was
that
pretty
entire
close.
back of the building was all kind of like all the windows were broken on the back side. There was one column in the middle of the back that was missing, and a big chunk of the lower west side was kind of gouged out.
Right. So this idea that it was just a fire.
Yeah, it wasn't just a fire.
Yeah.
The fire is what triggered the collapse eventually, but the fact that all the windows were missing from the south side contributed a lot to that because you got a lot of wind flow through.
See if he's got the I don't know, maybe this is a bit bad thing to do while you're actually doing the show. So this is what the idea is. The NIST computer models that all these floors had collapsed
Inside
and then the outside
building.
collapsed too.
Yeah.
But what this guy, Edward Current, had showed in his video, I think it was him, was he showed that the top part, that
the
part,
penthouse.
yeah, the top penthouse had collapsed first. There it is. So if you see the penthouse collapsing.
So you're syncing it up there with the two videos, the simulation.
So it's sitting up there, and then boom, you see it collapse.
And some windows breaking further down.
Exactly. And that's something that no one ever shows. And then it gives in.
Right.
So this is not a quick thing like a controlled demolition. All those windows giving in is indicative of all those floors collapsing probably more than it is the idea of, you know, the people that want to see conspiracy think that those bombs were going off there and that as those detonations or explosions were going off, that's what caused all those floors to collapse on top of each other.
Yeah, and I think like that's what I was talking about with the core beliefs of the conspiracy theories with 9/11. This fact that World Trade Center 7 looks like a controlled demolition is this core belief. But when you actually get into something and describe what's actually happening, you have to go to a much more complicated conspiracy theory and a much more complicated way of looking at what actually happened. And now they're trying to do a complicated study of World Trade Center 7 at the University of Alaska. This is something paid for by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. They're trying to actually figure out how they can reconcile controlled demolition with the fact that it collapsed the way it did.
Right.
So they're trying to actually explain something which doesn't really need explaining because the explanation has been done by NIST already.
So what they're trying to do is find something that reinforces their initial idea instead of just look at the facts itself, saying, oh, you look at the top of the penthouse collapsing, that's not indicative of a controlled demolition. That's indicative of the model that NIST described, which is a slow burn inside, extremely hot, deterioration of all the internal structure. Everything starts to collapse inside, and then the outside collapses too.
Yeah, well, some of them will say that that is actually how controlled demolitions are done. You blow up the interior of the building first, and then you blow up the exterior of the building. But the problem is that none of the exterior columns were cut. There was no explosion scene on the exterior columns. And if you look at the World Trade Center 1 and 2 coming down, you can kind of imagine there are explosions going all the way down because there's things that look like explosions from the falling floors. But in 7, you just see the building kind of crumple down. So they have to kind of explain that. So they come up with this study that they funded. It's cost them like nearly $400,000. And they're trying to come up with an explanation that doesn't involve fire. So they're saying, like, if it was controlled demolition, then the way they would have done it is blowing up these interior columns, and it would have pulled in the exterior and collapsed the way we see in the video. And I think that some of them say that the penthouse thing was a separate thing because they wanted to have a neat demolition. So they first of all blew up a few floors just underneath the penthouse, so it neatly collapsed inside the building, and then they blew up some floors at the bottom, so it all fell in on itself without damaging the surrounding buildings too much. So they've got this complex theory.
And it's based on confirmation bias. It's based on confirming this idea that this is a controlled demolition, not on examining the whole thing as it is and going, okay, is it possible that the NIST model is correct and that these look, the thing that I bring up to people all the time when they want to talk about conspiracies, there's a real conspiracy in 9/11, and that's the fact that it happened. The fact that they did fly planes into buildings, that's a conspiracy, and they pulled it off. Yeah. That actually did happen. People don't want that to be it. They want it to be a much broader conspiracy involving world governments that are trying to close in on, all our rights, and this is the way to do it. And
yeah, it's proportionality. People want something to be in proportion to the size of the event. Right. And they think just like a bunch of Arabs with knives isn't a big enough cause. So they think that it has to be something more significant. And even like with the physics of it, they think the plane flew into the building and it didn't collapse. So why would it collapse? Some people don't think that the plane would even have
that's my
gone in the
favorite
hole.
one.
They think it would have bounced off.
Or who the fuck thinks that?
Or some of them think that the tower would have been knocked over.
Really?
Yeah. But these are people who have really no conception whatsoever of physics, and it's a minority of people. But you'll find people who don't understand how aluminum can cut through steel. The columns of the exterior of the World Trade Center were made of steel, very strong steel, and planes are made of mostly aluminum. So they don't understand how a plane made of aluminum, which is soft, can go through steel, which is very hard and strong. And the example I always give to them is the ping pong ball going through a ping pong paddle. If you make it go fast enough, this is something I think Mythbusters do and various other people have done, you send a regular ping pong ball 500 miles an hour into a ping pong paddle, and it just goes straight through it, leaves a ping pong ball hole in the middle of it. And that's just what happened on 9/11. The planes were going at 500 miles an hour.
I didn't know you could do that with a ping pong ball.
You can.
Wow. That makes sense. It's just, for the planes, too, the amount of mass you're dealing with, too, and the speed. It's from 500 miles an hour.
Yeah, and it doesn't even need to be relatively that much mass. Yeah. You think a ping pong ball, it weighs like 1 gram, and a paddle weighs like 200 grams or something. So, and you wouldn't think, you've seen ping pong paddles, they're this laminated wood and rubber, and you've got this flimsy little ball, is how on earth is that going to go through there? So it's unintuitive.
Right.
So you can understand how people would be confused about why the planes left these little Roadrunner holes.
See if you can find that. You got the Mythbusters thing? I want to see that. Oh, here it is. Wow.
Well, that was the hole.
So they have some crazy air cannon. Yep.
Yeah.
Blows all. Okay. Here's the problem with that, though. Here's the problem with that. They're doing that right in front of that.
They have to, though, with the ping pong ball because it would slow down. But
I understand, but you're also dealing with the actual air.
yeah, but
But it is the ping pong ball that does it. You can see it in slow motion.
Yeah.
Because what I was going to bring up was a guy killed himself once accidentally on a movie set.